questions, drawing the three papers together. But first, I'd like to introduce Jingjing Zhao from Glasgow University, who's going to be talking to us about Chinese zodiac, animal images, and Chinese culture. Thank you. What I'll do is, when you've got about 3 minutes to go, I'll get my paper. Okay.
Chinese zodiac, which consists of 12 different animals, mouse, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig, is used to calculate the year in China. Each year is related to a specific animal. The 12 animals thus form a 12-year mathematical circle, repeating once again. In China, each person is attributed with an animal according to the year he or she was born. For example, the zodiac code for a person who was born in the year of monkey is monkey. And it's also believed that a person's personality is associated with his or her animal. For instance, a person whose animal is ox tends to be, is believed that he tends to be industrious and intelligent. Here is a complete sequence of Chinese zodiac. It starts with the year of mouse and ends with the year of pig. Everybody, I think, can find your zodiac comments. If you were born between 1972 and 1983, you can find your animal directly. And if you don't, if you want, you might need to do some mathematics. But it's fun because I think it will. The year you were born will probably appear later. Now let's quickly look through the 12 animals in Chinese zodiac. The first one is mouse. As you can see, I listed some of the common characters that are attributed to a person whose zodiac is mouse on the right-hand side. And also, if you were born in any of the 4 years, you will know that your animal is mouse. And next one is ox. Ox is the symbol of diligence in Chinese culture. Since ancient China, ox has commonly been used to plow the land, which still can be seen in many agricultural areas in China today. And it was also once used in transportation and war. The third animal is tiger. Tiger is one of the 3 wild animals in the zodiac, and it is always related to power and bravery in Chinese culture. It's rabbits, another domestic animal. Both of my parents are rabbits. Then this dragon, I would like to say a little bit more words about it. Dragon is the only animal in Chinese zodiac that comes from myths and legends, and as in it exists only in literature and arts, but not in reality. It's actually a combination of 5 different animals. As you can see, it has the body of a snake, the antlers of a deer, the talons of an eagle, the soles of a tiger, and the scales and the tail of a carp. What we call dragon today actually includes 2 different types of dragons from 2 distinctive cultural backgrounds. This is a Chinese dragon, which is different from a Western or European dragon. They distinguish from each other in many aspects. For one thing, Chinese dragon does not have wings. In legends, it flies by claws. Also, Chinese dragon is deemed as a divine animal. It is powerful but benevolent and kind, whereas a Western dragon can cover her people. Next one is snake, another wild animal in the zodiac. A snake is also sometimes called a junior dragon, and this is because in some legends, an immature dragon looks just like a snake and can only transform into a real dragon when it gets its flaming pearl. You can see the flaming pearl in this picture. Next one is horse. Horse has played an important role in people's lives since the Romantic period in China and was once widely used in different areas in history, just like ox. This is sheep. Sheep is one of the earliest domesticated animals in ancient China and has influenced the development of Chinese culture in many aspects, such as characters, ethics, and aesthetics. And monkey is the last wild animal in the zodiac. Like the others, monkey has a relatively short history in Chinese culture. It started to draw people's attention around periods when Buddhism was introduced into China. Nevertheless, it left significant mark in Chinese culture. The most famous one is the figure of Monkey King in literature. And then it's rooster. Rooster has a history of more than 3,000 years in Chinese culture. In some of the ancient myths, rooster appears at the beginning of the world and symbolizes the start of creation. And then it's dog. An animal we're all very familiar with. The earliest domesticated dogs in the world appear in Eastern Asia. In northeastern China and Korea, dogs are used in housekeeping and provide for their needs. Last one is pig. Pig symbolizes happiness and fortune. Many people believe that if you have a pig in your family, as in if there is someone in your family who's adopted this pig, he or she will bring fortune and wealth into the family. Therefore, in the year of 2007, which was just a few years ago, many young couples choose to have their babies in that specific year. Notice here that the characters of a person correspond to the characters of his animal. This is a feature that is common in the animal worship of the primitive society. For example, a clan whose totem is wolf regard themselves as strong and brave. And indeed, it's believed that Chinese zodiac is associated with the worship of animal images among the nomadic people in northwest of ancient China. The interesting thing is that in Chinese zodiac, the relationship between a person and animal is temporal rather than spatial. Each individual is attributed to an animal according to the year he or she was born, rather than where he or she was born. One of the explanations is that in a nomadic society, different clans usually have different living areas which form relatively independent societies, whereas the zodiac took shape in a society where people lived in a unified kingdom, which means that the region one is born becomes less important. Also at that time, in an agricultural society, the circulation of time becomes more important because it is associated with the growth and harvest of crops. There are also other characters in the zodiac which can tell us something about the social context from which it grew. For example, 2/3 of the animals in the zodiac are domestic animals, all of which have been playing an important part in people's daily life for a long period in Chinese history. While mouse is arguably the one animal that has domesticated itself, rather than being domesticated by human beings on purpose. Probably because one is from that life was much easier if it lived with us. The other animals are all useful in ordinary people's life. And in other words, the important status of an animal in Chinese society is reflected by being included into the Chinese zodiac. And this kind of correspondence or reflection becomes more clear when comparing Chinese zodiac with Vietnam zodiac. In the Vietnam zodiac, ox is replaced by buffalo, which is due to the fact that in Vietnam people use buffalo to plow the land rather than ox. The rest of the Chinese zodiac shows that it is also associated more directly with animal images in nomadic society. If we examine the rest for animals, it could be seen that they consist of 3 wild animals and dragon, with the exception of monkey, who probably secured its status in Chinese culture by the introduction of exotic culture from outside. The others are all typical totem animals, especially with regard to the Chinese dragon, which today still serves as a symbol for the Chinese people. As you might know, Chinese people still sometimes we call ourselves the descendants of the dragon, and the fact that the dragon is a combination of 5 different animals indicates that it could be a totem which was created when several different tribes merged together. Therefore, in a sense, the dragon can be seen as a totem which has survived since its ancient times and been successfully reserved and incorporated in culture in the agricultural society, which still exerts its influence today. The Chinese zodiac also appears in other forms and has other functions in Chinese society. For example, the animals in the zodiac are themes in Chinese paper cards, like this one, and the cartoons and New Year's paintings. And this is a Chinese calendar. The zodiac up here. This is Chinese painting, stamp, artifacts, keychains. Sometimes people give special names to their children according to their animal. It's also believed that if a couple's animals are in accordance with certain combinations, it will make them happy in their marriage. To conclude, the Chinese zodiac is a significant phenomenon in Chinese culture. It inherits the totem culture, which belongs to the Asian nomadic time, and is also blended with the distinctive characters from the agricultural period appear later in history. And this double character has made Chinese zodiac a living record of the interactions between animal and human beings in the Chinese society throughout our long history.
Like in English newspapers, we have horoscopes according
like the pig, many young couples just choose to born their children in that specific year. So in that year, we have more babies than usual.
This is more common. I was really interested in the image of the sheep, and in sort of Western culture, the sheep is always dumb. It's sort of stupid, it's constantly used as a metaphor for just a dumb thing following the flock. And I was really interested to see that these are very sort of all these terms are very positive. Even though you mentioned the dragon being powerful, it's in a benevolent way. That's very interesting culturally, seeing sort of all these positive attributes attached to these various animals, and also how be interested to see how we can sort of use these symbols and maybe bring them into Western sort of culture, to kind of maybe question some of the sort of really stuck metaphors to do with our animal images.
That's nice.
I think I probably know the answer because of the previous one, but like in the West, horoscopes are made much more complicated with charts and things. You can go to professional astrologists like fortune telling. I mean, it sounds like you haven't got that in China, and sort of tangentially, is there a form of fortune telling with sort of professional fortune tellers which we go to, if it's not true of this zodiac?
Sorry, can you say it again?
No, in this country, there is fortune telling based on our zodiac, complicated charts. It sounds like you don't have that in China, and if not, is there some other kind of fortune telling based on something else? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, we have some other like Taiji or Bagua. Have you heard about this? I don't know.
Yeah, with the six.
Yes, like that.
The I
Sun.
thing.
Half of it is black, the other half is right. So that's sun. And we have this specific book about it. So it's like if you want to get married one day, you just check the book and find a date that is lucky for you. Do things accordingly.
We probably need to move on to the next speaker. So
I was just going to ask which animal you are.
I'm a dragon.
Okay.
okay, thank you very much. Next we have Stuart Evans, who is curator of Ceredigion Museum in West Wales, coincidentally just up the road from where I'm from. And he's going to be talking about an exhibition which, again, rather serendipitously, I attended before Christmas and gave a talk at a symposium that Stuart had organised about human interactions with other animals. So it's really lovely to be reunited in this context. And so you're going to be talking about that exhibition.
Thanks very much for asking me, and it's nice to see you again. I'd like to start by just saying I'm a part-time MA student. I do 1 day a week at Aberystwyth University School of Art, and I'm 4 days actually at Ceredigion Museum, which is a social history museum. So I can actually say that I have to squeeze the MA into a very short space of time. I'm a display designer at the museum and hands-on with objects most of the time, putting them into showcases and, as in most museums, putting labels next to objects. So I'm dealing mainly with historical objects, putting them into showcases for the general public. I was very interested yesterday. I had a bit of time to go to Exeter Museum, if you get a chance to go, because they just had thousands and thousands of pounds spent on refurbishment. And they've got a very interesting new show down there. Do go if you've got a chance. I started off with this piece. It sort of fits in with your your last slide in a way, because I wanted to show a man-made pot holding a natural object, really, and it shows where I started with the exhibition We-Spirited Creatures. It was the idea of working with a ceramic collection in Aberystwyth. There's a fantastic studio pottery collection in the Aberystwyth University. And I was lucky in that I was given the opportunity to create an exhibition there. Professor Moira Vincentelli and I had talked about the idea of her inviting me in as an artist to do an installation in the gallery with the ceramic collection, but also marrying up some of the objects from Ceredigion Museum. I knew the collection in the Ceredigion Museum very well. I didn't know the collection in the ceramics department very well, but being a student there meant that I could open cupboards and have a look around and actually pull them out of the cupboards and see them in 3D. I think that's an opportunity that not many people get in museums, and it's fantastic to be able to actually take the objects out of the cases and see them all the way around and handle them. It's something that people don't often get to do, and I think, you know, it is magic just being able to be in that relationship with the object. Of course, it's nerve-wracking, but at the same time it does mean that you get the whole experience, well, that touch experience, which I think is vital really with some objects. This piece actually I see every day because it's actually in my bedroom, because my wife made the pot and a friend gave me the egg. That's where the idea started off, was the idea of you can see the hand marks on the pot, and it's holding nature. It's the seed of an idea, it's the birth of an idea, and really contemplating that as the start of an exhibition was, yeah, it's got to be in this exhibition, I felt. Why did I do the exhibition? Well, mainly because I thought that this would give me a good chance to explore a number of questions about what it is to be human. That's why I chose animals as a theme. I think animals give us an awful lot of answers about what it is to be human. And I wanted to explore aspects of spirituality, us as having a spirit. I was very interested earlier to hear about the whole idea about when we die, what happens to our spirit? Why do we think that animals don't have spirits as well, or do they? If we think of Christian beliefs, animals not being buried inside church grounds and all that sort of stuff, you know, this exhibition for me, or installation as I should say, actually raised an awful lot of thinking time and opportunities to raise questions in myself, but also I worked with other people on the exhibition and we toyed with lots of interesting ideas. Perhaps the questions come to the fore mainly because of personal bereavement and the fact that I have three grown children, well, growing children. I read children's stories daily and I'm filled with a renewed wonder about the world around me. I can once again enjoy the discovery of that world through their eyes, and I read an awful lot of children's stories daily, and they include lots of animals, often dressed as humans. Many Welsh folk tales. I grew up in Wales and I do speak Welsh and read Welsh, and in those Welsh tales as well there are often references to transformations. Early Welsh stories have a lot about tales of humans turning into animals and animals turning into humans. Animals in art are not a new idea, but sometimes they don't actually visit the art gallery. Although we have seen there are controversial things like you know, sharks in tanks and people are actually doing that sort of thing more and more now, where they're introducing, I suppose they're using animals in different ways. There's one on in the Hayward Art Gallery at the moment of a a stuffed terrier holding a placard up saying "I am dead" by somebody called Sharkey, I think his name is. And in our museum, in Ceredigion Museum in Aberystwyth, we have well, this is one of the displays I had to put up not that long ago, of historic taxidermy. This is Clip the dog, who was very popular with small children. Our village, our town, in Aberystwyth had a taxidermist family called the Hutchins family, and Clip was a pet dog that was stuffed by one of the Hutchins brothers. And when I was doing this display, I thought really that one of the things that I wanted to do with the ceramics display in the art centre was actually pull out some of the works that have been created by the ceramics, the potters, and find animal forms and put them together with some of the taxidermy from our collection and create conversations in the display in the art centre, mainly to start people who viewed the display up in the art centre, mainly to get them to start thinking about conversations and about animals and their relationship to animals. This was one of the first pieces. All the slides you'll see now, from now on, are actual slides from the display in We Spirited Creatures. The exhibition was on from the 29th of October 2011 till January the 29th, 2012, but it was actually extended for another month because a lot of schools visited and they used the exhibition for educational purposes, so it was actually extended for a month. The exhibition included skeletons, taxidermy, contemporary and ancient ceramics, found objects, drawings, prints, photographs, and also sound. I wanted there to be animal noises. There was some religious chanting, there was also some Darwinian theory, and the only labels, because I got so wrapped up in the whole thing of trying to interpret it with any words at all that I decided as an installation I didn't want to include any words. The only words that were in it were 4 poems by a poet that I know who wrote 4 poems especially for the exhibition, called Elena Powell. If anybody is interested, we did produce a catalogue. There are a few here, and the poems are in the catalogue in English and in Welsh. If you want a copy afterwards, come and see me. Basically, I started off, as with all exhibitions, you've got a space to fill with a certain number of showcases and a number of objects. The practicalities are you have to marry your objects to the space allocated and the number of showcases. That's the sort of reality of it. So I had to work out exactly, going backwards and forwards, how many objects I could put into the space and what do you want to say in those spaces. With this piece, the fossil which I found in a creek in Texas years ago, I put with this ceramic hand, just basically to suggest the touching of the ancient, really. I won't explain them all as to why I put them together. I shall just go through the slides, and if you want to write something about them, I suggest not more than 40 words, please, because that's what the recommended museum label is, okay? And remember, you've got to do it in Welsh as well. I borrowed some skeletons from the zoology laboratories in the university, and they were very kind in lending them. The title, We Spirited Creatures, came from the juxtaposition of the idea of, in fact, these two pieces. My children had some of these plastic dinosaurs at home, and this figure of John Wesley here was one of the pieces in the museum, and I just liked the idea, having read a bit of Darwin's Origin of the Species, about the whole notion of dinosaurs and spirituality, animal, where we've come from and what it means to be alive, really. And I just thought that trying to capture some of that idea of spirit and not actually writing a label but putting it in objects meant perhaps those two things would get people to start thinking about human beings trying to think about a god or a spirit or some other power, but also there being something before, after, during, out there, whatever. So that was that showcase. This is a piece by Alan and Ruth Barrett Danes that is in the ceramic collection, and they make pieces of vegetables with weird creatures coming out of them. And again, it's a kind of suggests other worlds, other dimensions, really, other creatures. This showcase had a piece, I really like this domed piece at the front, it's called Family, and it's a potter who's made what look like teapots, and in these shaved off areas there are little ceramic keys, suggesting a connection, a home, a place. And I put them together with ceramic eggs by another potter there behind. And then this stuffed owl, which another artist had put a monocle and a hat on. And in a way, the whole case, to me, putting those things together, brought the idea of a single observer in isolation, viewing the idea of a family, viewing the idea of birth, and on the showcase itself, we put, the poet actually chose a few words to put onto the showcase glass. So pray, there were Welsh words and English words, just put occasionally onto the showcases. So as you walked around, these words floated around the exhibition. Again, it was it was just all an experiment, really, to see whether it would work as an installation. I still feel that I've got a lot of work to do on the display, and I've made a sort of film about it, and I'm still thinking about what can be done with it as a work, as a piece of art. This actually is a piece of printed roadkill. There's an artist called Julian Meredith near Hereford who collects roadkill and then prints it. That's an owl, and he's actually gone up to as far as a deer. I don't know how he does it, but I borrowed that from him, and this rabbit here is in the collection, and it's to me it suggested one of the Mabinogion stories, the ancient Welsh Mabinogion stories, where Taliesin is the poet Taliesin, 13th century poet, is transformed at one point into a hare, and Blodaiwedd, the accursed woman, is turned forever into an owl. She lives forever as an owl. And just by putting those two, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know the story, but for me it was the suggestion of those two transformations, really, within one showcase. This piece is by Glenn Ibbotson, another friend who had explored the idea of almost sort of bionic man, really, where part of him is turned into a crab, combined with a ceramic crab. He's been working on that idea of human-animal parts, and it suggested as well, when I first saw these pieces, the idea of us using animal parts to become more, well, when we start toying with the idea of repairing ourselves. People, more and more as I get older, people are referring to hip joints and plastic knees and, you know, having things done to yourself. But there are artists who actually have things inserted into them as art. You know, there's the woman who has horns put into her head and plastic surgery, and there's more and more of this sort of stuff. You know, you have Botox and whatever. And this idea that you can have these things done, and I just put that in as a part of what are we doing as animals ourselves, to ourselves. This piece by Catherine Howell again goes back to, she works in, again she's a Welsh artist who deals with a lot of myths and legends about Wales. And at this point, this was really unfortunate because we went away for a cup of tea, and as we came back, this was actually sitting on the floor on the carpet, and it smashed, this piece, as we were away. And it really made me think about the spirit of the piece. Where does that go when it's smashed? The artist's actual spirit when they're working on a piece, and your relationship with that piece, when you hold a piece, when you're in that close relationship to the piece, and then it smashes, does that get released out of the piece? And again, the relationship of the death of the animal. There's something about the dying and the smashing of the piece. I just felt very strongly at that moment when we returned and found the broken piece that there was something about the death of the piece and the death of the animal that really felt very similar. These pieces I just put in, these two pieces, just to show the difference of the relationship when you start toying with how you put two pieces together. This is a Ruth Barrett Danes Dancing Beasts, and I put it with a crocodile handbag and a fur stole in a sort of decadent, what people would have accepted as a dressing up, you know, how to make yourself look glamorous, really, with animal furs and skin. And this, a nymph, is a half beast man there, and then the lower half is beast, the upper half is human, and this way is the other way around, where you've got the beast head, and the way in which mentally we can be beast-like or physically human-like. Again, it changes it over depending on whether we go for emotion, head or heart or body. And then my final slide, well no, nearly final, is the finding of a roadkill bird, where it made me think about how in our Christian background we use the iconography. I just went to Exeter Cathedral, and how many angels have wings and how many devils have horns and tails, and really how that's been used again and again as a symbol of otherworldliness, really, that we return to using animals really for those kinds of suggestions of other things. And then back to our need to look after what we've got in the way of nature. And there's a I'll just say the word emergence, okay? Write the word emergence down, because there is a group forming of artists who want to work in a sustainable way, get art to work sustainably with the environment, and it's called emergence, okay? So if you write that down, that'll be the main message. Thanks. It's just too many things to say, sorry.
I have a quick question. Thanks, Stuart. That was really great. I'd like to see the exhibition. And there's loads of things I can ask you. But just in terms of Flip the Savage Dog,
Oh, yeah.
I found it interesting that you said that it was children that were really relating to the dog. And I wondered why you think that is beyond the obvious that he's perhaps familiar, to them and things like that.
Yeah. really. I mean, what I found in our museum is that they drag their parents in all the time to see the stuffed dog, the horse. There's a stuffed horse, and it's things that they, I don't know. I mean, they want to see those things. You know, there are main bits, and there's a skeleton in the archaeology gallery, which again is one of those things. You know, quite a few adults come in and they say that should be buried. You know, it shouldn't be here. It should be buried. But the kids love it. You know, they come in and they say, look, his fingers are missing. Why aren't his fingers there? You know, that kind of stuff. And the archaeology club that come often want to pull him out and rearrange him or do things with him. He's called Charlie. It is. Because in my
Can you summarise the question? Because it's a bit quiet.
I was sort of talking about this postmodern idea of all these disparate images. Some of them are abstract, some of them are stylized, some of them are realistic. And you find this today to do with animals, particularly, I think, where you get this amalgamation of stuff, some real animals, and then you get plastic animals, and then people are consuming all of this great amalgamation of things, and people seem to be doing it very in a familiar way without thinking about it. I was just making a comment that actually working in a museum, of course, that goes on all the time, really. That sort of consumption.
Yes, I was fascinated yesterday that in Exeter because they'd just opened it again after a few years of it being closed, and one room they just put this is 0.01% of our collection, and they put an empty room with a wall full of absolutely anything displayed really well, and it's what you would expect really. There's a penny farthing, a dinosaur head, a clock, you know, so that it's anything, but with a little label underneath saying what it is. And then in the corner there's an art piece which is a few jars with etched wording saying dog's breath, or something, you know, and it's just air inside. So it's obviously a contemporary piece that you're meant to understand, you know, the general public is meant to understand, and presumably does. You know, we can accept it. You know, everybody knows what that is. So it's come a long way now to us accepting that, you know, at that level, we can all know that this is what a museum can be. You know, that it's going to be anything, really. I found it really odd then to think, well, what next? You know, what can we do? You know, what is there? You know, art can be anything. It can be switching on a light bulb on and off. You know, that's it, isn't it? You know.
Thank you very
Okay.
much, Stuart. Okay, so moving on, we have Jane Flynn, who's doing a PhD at the University of Derby, and she's going to be talking to us about sense and sentimentality.
This is actually the title of my PhD project, so what I'm going to talk about today is just a sort of a snapshot really. I'm just going to take you a very narrow little route through some of the sort of key points really that the project makes at the moment. So, first thing to do is really to put horses into their social context at the beginning of the 20th century. And as we know, it's a period of rapid change. Mechanisation is moving on apace, particularly public transport is rapidly becoming mechanised, but horses are still very much in evidence. For the majority of people, I think their relationship with horses would have been a working relationship. But increasingly an urban population were becoming horse illiterate in terms of they didn't really have anything to do with them. So those skills, some of the skills that had been in evidence were starting to be lost by a lot of people in the population. As far as war was concerned, horses were still very much connected with war. There hadn't been a war that didn't have horses in it. The one that was going to start in 1914 still very much had horses in it, and they wouldn't disappear until after the Second World War. Some would say that they still haven't. Increasingly railways were opening up the countryside to a lot of people, and leisure ownership was growing, increasingly wealthy population. A lot of people were able to get out of the city, out of the countryside. You get the birth of the country weekend. A lot more people are able to own horses than before. So you start to see the transition maybe from working animal to leisure animal that we see today. The humanitarian movement had been around for a good while by the beginning of the 20th century, but still had a very long way to go. There was a big outcry after the Boer War in terms of the horse losses in the Boer War. It was quite a scandal at the time, and when we get to 1914, people will still be remembering those events. There were a lot of people who hoped that once they got to when the First World War began, that horses weren't going to be needed, but that wasn't to be the case. So in 1914, in less than 2 weeks, the British Army increased its number of horses to 165,000. This is in contrast with the German Army, which began the war with 615,000 horses. This was largely because, although it wasn't modern mechanised from what we would imagine a modern mechanised army to be today, in comparison with the other nations involved, the British Army was actually a very modern, mobile, mechanised army. And it began the war with the intention of not actually needing that many horses. Because of the way things turned out, it became an increasingly horse-intensive war. Okay, so the initial cohort of horses were mainly purchased in the UK. This was done through a combination of methods. There was a horse registration scheme where people with suitable horses were encouraged to put their horse onto this register and were paid a certain amount per year to do so. That was quite popular with the bus companies and things because they got paid per horse, they got a lot of horses, so it was a way of getting a bit of extra income without really having to do anything, hopefully. But because of mechanisation, those types of horses, tram buses, the old tram horses, bus horses, they're not in evidence in the way they were before. That's a problem for the army because previously they'd always relied on those horses as a good, steady supply of the sort of horses that they were after. These horses were also compulsorily purchased. A lot of people were not happy, but they're happy to do their bit for the war effort and handed their horses over without too much trouble. Some people required a little more persuasion, and the horse purchasing officers were usually accompanied by a constable in case of problems. So to manage to get together enough horses to accompany the expeditionary force in less than 2 weeks was actually quite remarkable. And inevitably there were mistakes made, but on the whole it wasn't too bad. But this market was soon exhausted, and then Britain had to look elsewhere, had to look to the world markets to supply demand. This was, as you can imagine, a very expensive, laborious, labour-intensive business which involved a lot of problems with purchasing, shipping, getting horses from one place to another. Okay, so by 1917 the animals owned by the British Army peaked at 862,000 animals, 804,000 of which were horses and mules. The remainder were camels and oxen. Horses carried men, laid cables for telegraph communications, delivered ammunition and supplies to the forward troops, and hauled artillery guns. Indeed, so vital were they that one contemporary observer pointed out that nothing moved that didn't have a horse attached. Far from being an anachronism, horses were still, as one soldier put it, sacrosanct in the army. But sacrosanct did not mean that the army had some sentimental attachment to horses, but rather that they remained a vital tool in warfare. Thus, how many horses an army had, how well trained they were, and how fit they were to do their job were very important matters, and not, as has sometimes been suggested, merely the business of those who had nothing better to worry about. Horses were valuable assets. While a horse cost between £40 and £100, a soldier earned just 1.5 shillings per day, or 18 pence. At this rate, it would have taken him a year and a half to save up to buy a £40 horse. It's not surprising then that as far as its horses were concerned, the army proceeded with pragmatism and economy. If horses were to be killed, then this was to be as the result of enemy action and not, as had been the case in the Boer War, through avoidable ill treatment and disease. Recruits on joining up in any horse regiment had it swiftly impressed upon them that the horse's welfare came before their own. And again, this was not merely a matter of sentiment, but a matter of life and death. A horse could keep a man alive, or kill him, just as easily as a well or badly maintained rifle. Managing horses in war was no easy task. Hang on a minute. Sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. Managing horses in war was no easy task, and soldiers in horse regiments, contrary to popular belief, had a hard life. The drivers of transport and ammunition wagons often found themselves the target of enemy shell fire, particularly on the Western Front where, because of the atrocious conditions, horse transport rapidly became the only means of carrying vital rations, ammunition and supplies to the forward troops. Struggling slowly through mud while shells dropped all around him was a situation Johnston described as silent death. He also believed that, when he was assigned his 2 horses, this was his luckiest moment in the army. Without split ear and tuppence, he was quite convinced he would not have lived as long as he did. Johnston was painfully aware, too, that anyone reading his memoir would think him sentimental. But modern study of horse-human interactions demonstrate how the soldier-horse relationship had the potential to keep both man and horse alive. A driver who trusted his team and horses which trusted their driver were far more likely to come out unscathed than those who did not. If the army nurtured this soldier-horse relationship, which in many respects it did, then this was because it knew this made the team a far more valuable weapon in war. Although it would be wrong to assume that all soldiers had the same degree of respect for their horses as Johnston expressed here, there are sufficient examples to suggest that for some soldiers at least, the plight of their horses made as great an impression upon them as that of their fellow men. The patient's feelings about horses were very intense. He had been used to horses since childhood. As a boy, he was engaged about the stables and then became a groom. He wept profusely when talking to me of the sufferings experienced by the wounded mules in Gallipoli, and when I suggested that human beings suffered more, he would not have it so. Animals could not talk. No animals should have been allowed there, he said. He had never had any trouble with horses, for he understood them exactly, and he was always given the difficult ones to manage. He identified himself with a horse, consciously the soldier instinct of my patient would have no fear for himself. And that's a patient who was suffering from shell shock following Gallipoli. The horse allows us to understand what came to be a gap in experience between the war as it was in reality and the war as it was imagined. It provides a unique medium through which to explore the mindset of the British as they, in turn, lived through the events of World War I. What did they expect this new war to be like? Inevitably, this question would be answered largely by their experience of previous conflicts, an experience which, for the vast majority, was one which had been created for them by the artists of the illustrated press. By World War I, photography and war illustration began to be used side by side. Together they provided full pictorial coverage of the war's events, but alone the photographs still had severe limitations. One problem was that although it was seen to show events truthfully, the equipment was still very cumbersome. Very occasionally photographs appeared in the illustrated press, claiming to show the action as it took place. But it was far more common for photography to record scenes behind the lines, before a battle, or after it had taken place. During the war, in addition to the existing press, a number of publications emerged simply to cover the war's events. Some, such as the War Illustrated, were relatively inexpensive. Postcards could be bought for more popular illustrations, while many editions included posters of significant events to pull out and keep. Others included free gifts, such as themed backgrounds from which to mount a photograph of a loved one serving in the war. Thus, the war illustration had the potential to live on far beyond the edition of the newspaper in which it had originally appeared. One such example of this is Fortunino's Matania's Goodbye Old Man, an incident on the road to a battery position in southern Flanders, which appeared for the first time in July 1916. Now 100 weeks, and therefore 100 editions of the War Illustrated into World War I, this image of a young soldier saying a hurried goodbye to a dying artillery horse whilst under shell fire was to achieve lasting popularity. Matania created an artistic interpretation of events which at least appeared to show events as they happened. The force of the shell and the true horror of the incident were only suggested. Tension was instead created by the destruction of the nearby building, the smoke and flying debris, and the crater made in the foreground, indicating the full force of the blast which had wounded the dying horse. Pieces of hurriedly cut harness tell us that the soldier had returned, not simply to console the horse, but to retrieve what was an expensive piece of equipment. Remounts would provide them with another horse, and perhaps the harness could be used again. A brief glimpse of the sense behind the sentiment, perhaps. Far removed from any association of the horse with the foam-flecked glamour and excitement of the cavalry charge, both soldier and horse in Goodbye Old Man are really very ordinary. It was easy to identify with Tommy Atkins and his humble draft horse, and this, no doubt, added to its appeal. Imagine the terror of the horse that once delivered a shopman's goods in quiet suburban streets as, standing hitched to a gun carriage amid the wreck and ruin at the back of the firing line, he hears above and all around him the crash of bursting shells. He starts, sets his ears back and trembles. In his wondering eyes is the light of fear. He knows nothing of duty, patriotism, glory, heroism, honour, but he does know that he is in danger. It is not difficult to see the public fears which lie behind this account. Indeed, Matania's portrayal of death itself betrays concerns far more painful than those pertaining to what is, when everything is taken into account, simply a dying horse. The horse, when viewed closely, is clearly beyond any sort of aid. It is very nearly dead. Its eyes roll upwards and blood bubbles at its mouth. However, what is important is that it is not alone. Other than mercifully dispatching the horse, there is nothing more the soldier can do, but he still puts himself in mortal danger to say a last goodbye to a faithful comrade. This image then is not so much about the horse as about the soldier and his humanity. It certainly suggests a hope of kindness, which would have been a comfort to those whose loved ones were in the war. I think we can allow them a little sentimentality in such circumstances. It is testament to the enduring appeal of images like Goodbye Old Man that even in this mechanised age, the soldier's horse can still capture the public imagination. But what we must not forget is the sense which underpinned the sentimentality. Thank you.
Any questions?
You mentioned at one point that it was impressed upon the men that in some ways the horses were more important than they were. I wondered if more horses survived proportionally than men, and what you're saying on the German side?
Horse losses in the British Army were significantly less than they were in the other armies of the other nations, and that was largely because of the reforms that had been made to the veterinary corps between the Boer War and the First World War, enabling them to reduce horse losses, largely through better, a lot of it was just through better care and better management, and also taking horses out of the front line before they got to the point where they were so worn out that they were past the point of no return. So taking them out of the front line, allowing them to convalesce and then putting them back in again. So they got a lot more work out of them actually in the long run. Yeah. Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No, say. No, sorry, what?
No, it answers the second bit. The first bit was just whether proportionally more horses or men going back with
I think it'd be hard to. A lot of horses, whereas the men were shipped back at the end of the war, the horses weren't. A lot of them, they had different categories of what they were going to do with them.
I think your answer was more interesting than the question I originally asked.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. It's the short answer, sorry. A lot of it came down to purely, as I said, economy and pragmatism. They talk all the time about economy. So if it was, horses were basically given so many weeks in which to convalesce, and if they didn't get themselves right in that time, that was it, bye-bye. I think they had to be very hard-nosed about which horses they thought were going to recover and which weren't. Some were sold to the local population, to work. Some were sold for meat. Some were sold for other products. So, they didn't meet a very heroic end, most of them, unlike the film. A tragedy with a happy ending. Yeah, but they were actually able to quite through good veterinary care, they were able to save quite a large proportion.
British soldiers eat horses that they shot.
Evidence suggests that yes, they might have. Probably, if you've read anything in the War Illustrated, it would have said no, British people don't eat horses. Oh, we don't do that sort of thing. We're British, don't we know? But when you start digging around in it, you find out that only really, I think, in extremis, but yes, they do. Yeah, I'm afraid so. I've been reading about the siege of Ladysmith, which is Boer War, but and they did end up having to eat their own horses, which was a big problem.
On that note,
And on that cheerful note,
maybe, has anyone got any questions for the speakers as a collective? Or any comments to draw three very, very different papers together? But I symbolism areas in human-animal interactions, from the Chinese zodiac to taxidermy in a museum context to horses, the representation of horses in a context. I wondered if any themes emerged that you might like to just kind of put to them. Or maybe, sorry.
I was going to say, I think it is amazing the kind of influence that animals have, or non-human animals have on human existence. And I think that's where I took from it, that they are so fundamentally important. And I think that all of the three papers really demonstrated that they are fundamentally important. Just going back to Jane's paper, I don't know if you're aware of Mariah Dickin, who started PDSA. It's a veterinary organisation I work for. There's another PDSA vet here, ex-PDSA vet. And she started PDSA in 1917, which was actually during the First World War, and that was in response to a great amount of animal suffering that was seen on the streets of London, and that included at that time working horses. And there was the Dickin method, which was formulated really to award heroic animals. Now, I'm not sure, do you know if the horse was ever awarded the Dickin method? Because we get taught this when we join the PDSA, don't we? We have an induction, but it might be something you'd like to look into and contact PDSA, their archives, because it may be that horses have been awarded the Dickin award for bravery. And I know it was brought out during the First World War in direct response to the recognition and contribution that animals made to our lives at home. So,
I think a lot of that was as a result of the rationing, because they were rationing food for people. They were rationing horse feed. So there were a lot of campaigns around that period towards the end of the war reminding people that they needed to take into account when they were working their horses that they weren't getting the same amount of